Morning, everyone. We've got the lovely Mythili in the house. You've become part of the furniture at Bumpwise Coffee Mornings, which
I
is
love that. I love that.
lovely for all the time you're spending, not just on the coffee mornings, but also when we send you clients. Really grateful for you and your team and the work you do at Mother and Child. So I will let you introduce yourself to start with. Just a quick one. Tell us where you're from, as in your career path, basically, and how you came to love breastfeeding so much and how you work with moms, basically.
Wow, this is loaded. So I think I fell in love with the whole process of working with moms and babies while I was in medical school. And that was, gosh, I actually don't want to do the math, but it was many, many years ago. And what basically happened was while I was working as a medical student, I saw lots of women just going through labor as if it was part and parcel of life. And that's something I really felt empowered about, right? Because these women would just rock up into the labor ward. They will labor the way that they wanted to, sometimes standing, sometimes on all fours. And this was in Australia. So it's a very different setting. And this was really out far west, right? So people would just come in, labor, hang around the hospital, get some help breastfeeding, and then they'll head off back into their farms, back into wherever they're meant to be at. And it wasn't medicalized, it was very midwife driven, it was very doula driven. Not even doula, I think it was just a birth partner. There wasn't actually a term doula popularized at that point in time. And when I came back to Singapore and I wanted to see something like that happening, it was a lot more medicalized, I suppose. You know, people would come in, they would change into their hospital gowns, they would have their CTG strapped on, they would have an IV fluid, and they'll have like a bag of fluid going through. Sometimes they'll ask for an epidural, sometimes they'll ask to be knocked out completely, undergo a C-section. So it was a very different setting altogether. And I just kind of went along with the flow because I felt like, okay, this is what happens in Singapore, right? But shortly after that, I got pregnant with my first one, and I was running the labor ward. I was doing all the things that I was meant to do as a good, medical resident in the hospital, in a very busy medical ward as well. And then I saw this one woman who had the most amazing process of labor, right? And she had the lights dimmed down low. She had a track going on in her ears. Her husband was just there holding her arm and, just holding her shoulders and putting pressure in all the right places. I was like, what is going on? What voodoo thing is happening here? And right beside her, there was this book called Hypnobirthing. It's like,
Mhm.
what is this? Like, what ritualistic thing are you doing in that room? Like, do I need to bring like a silver cross over there? And and but she had the most beautiful birth. She was like, do not ask me for my pain score. Do not knock on the door asking me if I wanted the epidural. So I just stood at the back in the shadows, just watching her labor and just to kind of intervene if anything were to happen. And she had the most amazing birth. And then I realized this is what I had witnessed in Australia in the labor wards. And I
Yeah.
wanted that. I wanted that for my own birth, but I also wanted her empowerment. I wanted every woman who I was in charge of in the labor ward to understand labor and feel like I am in control of my birth because this is my story that I'm going to write, not the doctor's story, not the hospital story. And and so that was where I got into this whole scene of birthing and mothering and things. Um, I could go on for another hour.
This is not breastfeeding and mummies. I swear we're going to get.
Sorry.
I think this you mentioned such an important thing is that Singapore has a different setup. Therefore, a lot of people around you, or even the people who we look to as being experts, they are not necessarily very familiar with breastfeeding often
Yeah.
because haven't been breastfed. They haven't breastfed their children. It wasn't a thing in Singapore so much. I think it's only becoming more of a thing now. And therefore, I think we just don't get the right support at the hospital and by pediatricians and in our GP's office and so on and so on. And the other thing that I want to mention is you're talking about taking charge of your labor. And I think this is so important. So many people hire a doula, go to a doctor, whatever it is. But they're like, okay, we've done that. And now they're in charge. But you have to be empowered yourself. Like you have to rock the birth. We are just there to support in the background, right? But the same applies to breastfeeding. And
That's it.
mamas need to be empowered. They need to have a plan in place. They need to know what to expect and be, like you said, have all the information and be realistic about what is going to happen. And this is now bringing us to where I want to start, which is the first 2 weeks of baby's life, because I really think that things can go downhill so fast when you're super tired from birth and you don't know what to look out for. So can you talk a little bit about that? The days at the hospital, but then also at home. What is crucial for moms to be mindful of?
Yeah, 100%. Sorry, I had to go on and on with that just now. I just felt like I needed to share it. Okay, so after the birth, one of the things that people often say is, I'm going to take a break. You take charge of the baby. I'm going to take charge of myself. But a lot of moms forget that actually you and the baby are a dyad now. Like you're part and parcel of the same organism. So the baby does not know a life outside of you yet. So as the baby is there with you, you are then able to use your oxytocin drive, you're able to use your prolactin, and the baby will be able to find the way to the breast right away. And that's where they belong. They belong on your chest, skin to skin, because they don't know what else is out there. They don't know the cold, they don't know the feel of a nappy on their bottoms, they don't know like being wrapped up in a straitjacket, also known as a swaddle. They don't know any of those things. They don't know the taste of anything else but the breast milk, because that's exactly the same taste that they have had in their mouths via the umbilical cord and everything. So that's where they belong. And I feel like when we move the baby away from the mother, they have their panic buttons set off. They're already going to get very cortisol driven. They're going to be very stressed. They're going to be very upset. And that's why as soon as we put the swaddle on, they feel falsely that they're back in the womb again, because they feel like they're all, snuggled, they're all warm, and they're kind of all wrapped up. As soon as you remove the swaddle, they go screaming bloody murder all over again. And that really just tells us that actually they're really falsely satiated. They're feeling a false sense of comfort in there. So think about that the next time you separate the mom and the baby, or you put your baby away from you for a second.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And also, I have a lot of moms who like the baby is crying so much, it's crying so much, but especially when they're just born, that's for them to do, right? We want them to cry, we want them to clear the mucus. It's not that something is wrong, it's just that baby just needs to be held and do its thing, and we shouldn't be pushing them, So, but the same goes for, yeah, as you say, lots of skin to skin. I think that's really important. Then, can you talk about keeping track of poos and so on, because that is really what tells us that things are going into the baby's mouth and stomach and so on.
Yeah, so in the first couple of days, the baby, as they will feed, the first pee and the first poo is actually quite important, right? So we start to see one pee on day one and one poo on day one. On day two, we'll see two pees and two poos. Day three, three pees, three poos. And by the time the milk starts changing from colostrum into transitional milk, that's when you start feeling your breasts are feeling fuller. You could feel the entire world with milk, and that sort of feeling like it's so full and so angry. That's when we know milk's coming in. And that's when your baby would have actually had lots of practice suckling on the colostrum, on the softer breast. So when the milk starts coming in, they're going to be acing it right away. Um, the color of the poo actually makes a huge difference as well. So in the first day, we see black tarry poo, like the back of our Zoom screen right now. That's the color. It's really hard to get rid of. So you might need like 15 baby wipes just to get rid of a small amount of meconium. That's what they call it. So sometimes we just say, hold the baby under the tap, wash it off gently, and that should be much easier to get rid of. On day 2, with a bit more meconium coming through the breast, we'll start to see blended kale, almost like a color of blended kale. And then on day 3, where you maybe start to see some transitional milk, it would look a bit more like pea soup, blended peas, right? As the milk comes in properly, then we start to see this mustardy color. Can you see the color of this? Yeah. And that's when we know the milk's come in and it's almost like sunshine, like, hello, diaper, hello, sunshine. And that's exactly what we want to see. So that tells us that milk's come in, the baby's getting a good mouthful of milk every time the baby suckles and the baby's swallowing the milk. And that's great. Then tells us that everything is coming along quite nicely.
But then tell us how quick, like what to look out for. Obviously, we know the color now and so on, but what do I do if I'm falling behind? What do I do if I'm falling behind, and how quickly do we need to react? Because I have seen moms who are they're just not feeding enough. They're not putting the baby on enough. They're not given the right advice, I think, and they maybe don't know about hand expression. So tell me your take.
Okay, so so we want babies to be feeding at least 8 to 12 times or more in 24 hours. Some babies who are born earlier, like at 36 weeks, we call them late preterms, they tend to be very sleepy, so they're good babies, but actually they're just babies who are not stimulated enough. They're not quite ready to face the world yet. And so when we let these babies be good babies and then let them sleep for extended periods of time, they run the risk of dehydration, underfeeding, dropping off the charts, not getting enough food and things like that, right? And that's very worrying. So I've had moms who come in and say, oh, my baby's so good. They only feed 4 times a day. I'm like, hoo, alarm bells going. That's very scary. 8 to 12 times or more in 24 hours is what we're expecting. If your baby is appearing to be a very good baby, I wonder whether we are swaddling the babies too much. I wonder whether we are keeping our babies underfed, right? Or sleeping far too long when they should be. And so these babies are the ones how I'd say we need to unswaddle them. We need to have them put skin to skin as much as possible, because that kind of turns on their newborn feeding reflexes. And skin to skin means actually skin to skin. So no clothes on the baby's chest, just a nappy on, no bra, no t-shirts, baby's just flat, like a lizard on the wall on you is what I would expect the baby to be doing. We want to listen out for swallows. So they can suck and suck till the cows come home, but if there's no swallow, there's no transfer of milk. So we want to make sure that we're actually listening out for a little gluk, gluk sound. And that's a guttural sound that we hear when a baby's actually drinking and transferring milk into their bodies.
I think it becomes a vicious circle as well, because it's not just the baby not being fed and not even having the energy to cry, but it's also that the mom's breasts are not receiving the stimulation that they should be getting. And that's where then we're falling behind, not only on food, but also on milk supply. And then a whole barrage of things can happen. Okay, I'm very mindful that it's already 15 minutes in. So I want to say one thing. Mummies on the call, we're here for you, okay? We do have a list of stuff that we want to mention that I think will be relevant for many of you. But if you have specific questions, please let us know and we'll get right into it. And one of them is Queenie, who had to drop off the call because baby is awake. But she basically asks, do breastfed babies who are growing along their own curve need any additional multivitamins or iron supplements? And thank you for the education, Mythili. So what do we supplement babies with?
Babies don't actually need much supplementation besides vitamin D, especially if you're not exposing your baby to much sunlight, right? And if you have got melanin in your skin like I do, then we definitely need extra vitamin D. Why? Because vitamin D is really important for bone development, bone growth. But it's not just that. It's not just a vitamin for bones, but it's also a very important prohormone. We're beginning to now understand that vitamin D is important for moods, for general enzyme development, for protein development, for forming the connections in the midline from your corpus callosum and things like that as well. So it's really important that babies are getting enough vitamin D. If you chose not to supplement your baby with those vitamin D drops, then I think what you could do is you might need to take mega doses of vitamin D so that you then produce enough vitamin D through the breast milk for your baby. And that might ring up to the 6,400 IUs each day that you'll need to make sure that your baby gets enough as well.
And that's a perfectly fine thing to do. But what about others, like multivitamins, iron supplements? Do babies need those?
Babies don't need anything else besides that vitamin D because everything else comes from breast milk. Iron, particularly, if we start supplementing your baby with iron, we find that it actually messes up with the baby's microbiome in the gut. So they have an overgrowth of certain unhelpful organisms like E. coli or other bad organisms that might contribute to diarrheal illnesses and decreased immunity in the child. So we don't recommend iron supplementation until they're 6 months old. Okay, so then we can talk about maybe iron supplementation. We can even talk about giving babies much more iron-rich foods like pieces of steak or blended kale. Sorry, I mentioned blended kale in two different settings here. Or spinach, things like that. But prior to that, you don't actually need any other supplementation for the baby besides breast milk.
Yeah, amazing. So that's good. I think she means probably actually means beyond 6 months, but I'm totally with you. I think the multivitamins, the minerals, all of that we're getting from the food is actually much more better absorbed than anything that we can give in supplement form. And supplements for kids often have nasty, ingredients that we don't want to. I sorry, Mythili? Oh, my microphone?
Oh, is it mine?
No, you're okay. What is happening is it's very loud outside your door. So I wonder if
Is it loud outside my door? I'm so sorry. Hang on one second. Let me try and see if I can decrease my background sound. Is that better? Can you hear the background still or?
not at the moment.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to another question. My baby just turned 1 and he still breastfeeds 2 times a night, around midnight and at 3 a.m. Then he wakes up at 6 a.m. and feeds. I want to stop breastfeeding during the night and planning to cut the first feed for 1 to 2 weeks and then stopping the second one. Does this make sense? Any things to consider? I tried stopping the first feed when he was 9 months old. We were on holidays and I got mastitis for the first time.
Babies turn 1, huh?
How do we drop night feeds, or how do we replace them? Does that then cause an issue with our supply if we don't feed at that time?
So at 1 year, at 1 year old, I would assume that the mother's milk supply is more or less stable, right? It's kind of established already. Now we can try and prolong it instead of just cutting it out completely. Do you know what I mean? And I suppose what does feeding at night actually refer to? Is it I think this is for Karen, right? Is it a feed that we want to avoid at 3 a.m. or is it a feed that at 5 a.m. that we want to avoid, or is it a 12 midnight feed? So for most people, not waking up in the middle of the night usually just means no feeds between 12 midnight and 6 a.m., right? Now, you have to think about it. When babies wake up in the middle of the night, it's really because they have an unmet need. Is it the lack of connection that they're missing out on? Or is it fear of what's beyond under the bed or what's outside of the window? Are they hearing a sound that is worrying to them? Are they hearing howling gusts of wind outside? And this is then an unmet need because they are feeling fearful. They're scared of what might be outside of them. And or is it a need for food to nourish their bellies? Is it because they're not eating solids enough before they go to bed that then they wake up feeling hungry in the middle of the night? So if we can kind of figure out what it is that they need, then we can try and eliminate that feed. Does that make sense? So yeah, some babies can't go for more than 4 hours without feeds, and that could be quite normal, right? And sometimes what moms can do is they can just offer them a little bit of a feed before she goes to bed. So babies can sleep at 8 o'clock, right? But the mom's actually only going to bed at 12. So she could offer a feed at 12 and a bit to kind of prolong that night sleep, that longer stretch of sleep as well. That could be something else to think about. Is the baby getting enough iron? Is the baby getting enough protein in the diet? All of these also kind of fill the baby up so that they might be able to sleep for a little bit longer in the middle of the night.
Okay. Thank you. Next question. How often do we need to wake an infant up for feeding in the middle of the night? If the infant is doing well in general, can we just let them sleep? How many hours maximum without a feed? And she's talking about a 0 to 3 month old.
Ooh. At 0 to 3 months, okay, so before the babies reach 12 weeks old, the risk of SIDS is super high. And so we don't recommend babies sleeping beyond 3.5 to 4 hours at a stretch. Why? Because if they are sleeping beyond that, the risk of very deep sleep, the risk of and what is the word for it? Hang on, let me think. My brain's not working so well. Very arousability starts to decrease, and that can be quite a significant issue, right? So I wouldn't recommend anything beyond 3.5 to 4 hours for a long stretch of sleep in the middle of the night. We want the babies to be arousable.
Okay, that's in the first 3 months. And then when can they go? When would you say is a good time for them to be able to go longer stretches?
Yeah, after 12 weeks would be okay. Longer stretches will be about 5 hours. Anything beyond that, I would be wary of whether they're, I mean, I actually want to make sure that they're still okay in the middle of the night.
And this is so, we think of it as, I mean, everybody wants an uninterrupted night's sleep, but we need to think of that being not conducive to the baby's brain development, safety, and so on and so on. Any tips for feeding a teething baby?
Ooh. You have to remember that when a baby is yeah, they shouldn't be biting. When they're feeding at the breast, the tongue's actually under the breast. So if that's the breast, the tongue of the baby should be under and scooping under the breast. So the teeth actually are under the tongue. So the tongue's actually protecting the breast from the teeth. When they start to draw, that's it. When they start to draw the tongue away, you'll feel it. You know when the latch is not right. And so that's when you take the baby off and offer them a frozen washcloth or a teething toy or something else to chew on. Okay. One of the things that I often tell parents to do is if you feel like the latch is changing and they know you've actually fed enough and they give you this naughty glance and into your eyes, then you know, okay, a bite is coming on, take them off right away because you don't want to damage your breasts.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice would you give a first-time mom to gain enough information about breastfeeding before trying for the first time? Is there any podcast, YouTube, book, online article that's easy and quick? I love that. Good question.
Oh. Would you rather listen to a podcast or would you rather get one-to-one advice from a lactation consultant? I often recommend that.
So Annika will be learning a lot about breastfeeding in the class on Saturday, doing our antenatal classes. So we are jam-packed with information. So I think you'll get a lot out of there. I also think, like you're saying, a pre-lact consult might be very good. What do I have actually? There's Jack Newman is obviously, our favorite breastfeeding guru. He's Canadian, I think, a doctor, a pediatrician. There's Nancy Moorbacher as well that I find is good. There's the series, what is it called? Why something matters. So this is why starting solid matters, but there's
Amy Brown, right?
yeah, but there's also, they have a lot in the series, why breastfeeding matters, and they're short booklets that are quite concise and have a lot of good information. There's also one on baby sleep. So that's another, that the whole series is actually really, really good. So maybe that's something you can consider as well. Anything else?
There's a book called The Art of Breastfeeding, by La Leche League. That's a beautiful book. I've actually gifted that to quite a few of my friends as well.
Yeah,
That's a good one to have. Yeah.
amazing. And then in terms of Instagram accounts and stuff like that, obviously you have mother and child. You share some information there as well on your own Instagram too.
Yeah, I have some information. I haven't updated it in a while, but a lot of the information's still there on my channel, on my Instagram account. Um, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot out there, but I think getting the first-hand information from people who like you, like Johanna and Bumpwise, or coming down to Mother and Child for a pre-like consult, I think all of this would be very handy information and will give you information that would be um, accessible, easy to digest, and also relevant because you don't want to get information from like for information that's suitable for a 3-month old or a 6-month old, but you want information that you can use right now.
Exactly. And I'll say one thing too. I mean, this is like I'm blowing my own horn, but as doulas, we do so much more than support you at birth, right? Because we do check in with you daily after the baby is born to see how it's going. And we will be asking the questions, what color is the poo and how many poos and pees have you had? And if we feel that you're falling behind, that's when we can really pick it up quickly and get you the support that you need, either by us coming to the house or by engaging a lactation consultant. But it's so important to nip things in the bud rather than letting it fester and then it becoming a downward spiral as well. Okay. Oh, that's it. Give us more of your questions. We'd love to answer more. I want to talk about, so first few days, I will add one thing. And this is something that has been coming up for me lately with my clients who are at different hospitals or have pediatricians that are not very supportive of the mom's breastfeeding goals, is what I would call that. Because if I know that a mom is wanting to breastfeed exclusively, ideally, then introducing a bottle in the early days is just not going to be great. And extending the baby's stomach and, all of these things. Can you talk a little bit about flow confusion? And can we talk a little to later? Actually, let's park that for later about the book. Yeah.
Okay, so flow confusion is actually something that I'm I actually bring a lot of emphasis on flow confusion. Okay, so think about it this way, okay? When you're eating something, when you're chewing something, you are anticipating that you're going to get a mouthful or a bolus of food that's going to be dropped down into your gullet, right? So you're actually chewing in anticipation that you're going to create a bolus and then you swallow. If I am just putting a hose filled with my garden hose right at you, you're not anticipating. All you got to do is you swallow, because if you don't swallow, it gets into your airways and into your lungs, correct? Same thing. When I suckle on a straw, or when I suck on a straw, I'm expecting and anticipating something flowing at the back of me. And that's how it is at the breast. When a baby's suckling at the breast, they're suckling, they're anticipating that they're going to get a bolus of milk and then they swallow it. When I give a baby a bottle, the baby's not in charge anymore. The only person who's in charge is the parent giving the baby the bottle. So oftentimes, depending on how the baby's given the bottle, imagine if I'm tipping the bottle right over like that, it's just going to flow. And if it's going to flow, it's going to get into their airways if they don't swallow. And that's always a worrying thing because aspiration risk is very high, and therefore pneumonia risk is also going to be very high. So think about that. We want babies to suckle so that they can anticipate a flow coming through. And so the suckling is really important. It's not just about filling the babies up with milk, it's actually getting them to suckle properly. And if they suckle, do they want a very large volume of milk going through, or do you want just the right amount for the baby? So another reason why we never increase the flow rate of the bottle, it's a marketing gimmick. 0 plus, 1 plus, 3 plus, 6 plus. Does the breast
Change.
nipple paw change? No, it doesn't. It's a marketing gimmick. That's the only way bottle manufacturers sell more items at the end of 1 month. Otherwise, they never sell anything new, do they? So it's a marketing gimmick. Don't fall for it, please. Stick with the same 0 plus teat sizes all the time. There's something else here that we call pace bottle feeding. And I don't know, do we have time for this?
Yeah, I think we do.
Okay, so a pace bottle feeding really just means that we keep the bottle teat half filled with milk and half filled with air. So as the baby suckles, they're going to only get a little bit of milk flowing at them, and then they can anticipate the flow, and then they can start swallowing right there. When we tip the bottle like this, milk's already going to flow at them without them needing to suckle. Okay, so we keep the bottle teat horizontal. Yes, they're going to get some air, but we're also going to be keeping the baby upright. So we keep the baby upright, and I'm going to tilt the screen down a bit. We keep the baby upright really close to the chest, right there like that, right? And let them suckle on the teat. As the milk flows, they're going to swallow, and then we can expect them to swallow. When we have them this way, we don't have any options. The baby doesn't have an option. They're just going to suck and swallow. They're going to swallow, swallow, swallow. They're not sucking at all. Okay? So if your baby's kept upright, the air is going to rise, and they're going to be able to burp. Once they use their tongue and push the teat away, give them a burp, hold them upright, give them a burp, and then we switch sides so that they're also going to learn how to use both sides of their neck easily at the same time. We don't twist, we don't turn the bottle, we don't tap on the bottle, we don't do any of those things. We just allow the baby to decide, okay, I'm done now. Let me play now. I don't want to eat anymore. All right? And that's okay. So we're not in charge, the baby's in charge. The baby will then determine how much milk they want to eat.
Yeah. And so this is, and I want to dwell on the bottle feeding thing for a little while, because we do have moms who do end up bottle feeding, either as a choice because they just don't have the time to direct latch, they have to go back to work and all of that, or that eventually they want to introduce a bottle for when they go back to work or go out or whatever it is. So I want to talk to the point of even on the bottle, and I am coming, this is my own experience because I have one baby that I didn't breastfeed for very long, and then the others where I exclusively breastfed. And I know how easy it is to overfeed a baby on the bottle because I think, I just made this formula, or even if it's my own breast milk, I've already defrosted it. I don't want to throw it away. It's so precious to me, right? And then there's the force feeding coming into the mix where we are, oh, come on, you can finish it. So we want to responsively feed, right? That is the goal, and that's what paced bottle feeding allows us to do.
That's it. Because at the breast, when babies are suckling, they actually get milk. When they stop suckling, they don't get any more milk. So they're really in charge of their own feeding session. So when moms tell me I fed for 20 minutes, I'm like, okay, that's nice. And then they say, oh, but then the next feed was 30 minutes. I was like, it actually doesn't really matter because ultimately the baby will take what they want. And when they haven't had enough, they will wake up again within the next couple of minutes to finish up the feed. It's like you and I, if we eat a little bit and then, we're like, oh, all right, I'm getting distracted. I'm going to read the newspapers and I'm going to come back and finish my breakfast after a few minutes. That's perfectly normal. Why is it not normal for your baby to do the same? Right?
Absolutely. And then also we don't eat the same amount at every single feed. And I think babies vary, but the bottles, we always make the same amount, you know?
That's it. Yeah.
Listening to our babies, tuning in with them a little bit more, I think. Um, Sarah, I am going to get to your question. Just want to finish off the bottles because I'd like you to show Mythili what a suitable bottle is for moms who are planning to go between bottle and breast, who are going to be eventually alternating, continuing to breastfeed maybe after work or before work, but during the day,
Mm-hmm.
else is giving a bottle. So what are the best bottles for a breastfed baby?
Okay, so this one's a tricky question because as an IBCLC, we are not meant to be talking about bottle teats, but what I will do is maybe I'll take the teats off the bottles and then you can try and figure out which ones they are. Okay, so there are three here.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's quite obvious which one this one is. Yeah, and there's this one here. Can you see that? Yeah, and then there's also this one here, right? The bottle teats that we want to use
Actually,
is,
hold them more like this, yeah.
okay,
Shirt, because then we can see the shape
the
better.
color, all right? And then we've got this one as well.
Yeah. So what are we looking out for?
Okay, what we want to see is we want a teat that is like Mount Fuji.
Okay.
You see that? We want it to be very conical. Think Madonna's conical breasts, right? We want it to be looking like that. So that when a baby suckles, when the baby reaches out and scoops under, they can then form a seal. And it's meant to be quite firm. It's not meant to be too soft, right? So we want it to be a nice, firm teat in the baby's mouth. The baby's using the tongue to scoop under the breast and then drop the back of the tongue. Drop the back of the tongue so that then they can start to suck and create a lower pressure system in the mouth. And then milk starts to flow. We definitely don't want them to be chomping on the teat of the mouth. Does that make sense? We don't want to be chomping. We want them to be pushing the tongue outwards, lapping it up, and then pressing it up onto the palate and then dropping the back of the mouth like that. That's what they should be doing. When we have a teat like this, you're not allowing that to happen because number one, you can't pace it. As soon as you hold it like this, what tends to happen is the entire teat fills up with milk. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, as compared to this. Yeah, right? So if you fill it up with milk, then we're not pacing anymore. It's already going to be filled up with milk. All the baby needs to do is they chomp down on it, and milk's going to squirt at them. It's going to squirt right at them. Okay. The other tea that I was showing you is something that's shaped. Can you see this? How elongated it looks like? When we use a teat like this, again, we're not allowing them to scoop under, right? They're just encouraged to chomp down. Okay, so we want a nice conical shaped teat. We want a teat that is quite firm, and so they can't chomp down so easily. Number one. Number two, they're encouraged to scoop their tongues under and press it up onto the palate, and then the back of the tongue then drops to create a low pressure system.
Is really important because the way the baby feeds at the breast is very different from how they would feed at a bottle. So then they're developing the wrong technique, I think. And a lot
That's
of
it.
people look at these bottles and say, oh, this is so much more, it's more shallow, it's wider. That's much more what my breast looks like. But it isn't how your breast looks like in the mouth. You know what I
That's
mean?
it.
That's what we're mimicking. We want the baby to get that deep latch where the tip of the teat or the nipple will arrive all the way at the back of the mouth where the soft palate starts, right? So I think we need to think of it in a different way. So I'm
Correct. Can I also add something? The
absolutely.
best time to introduce a bottle is not in the first couple of days, yeah? There are other ways to feed a baby besides using a bottle. There are tons of things like using a syringe, right? There's also using a feeding tube,
Yeah.
right? There's also using a feeding tube that we use. I think Johan and I are quite familiar with this, and we often talk about using feeding tubes with our mums in the first couple of days when the milk hadn't come in and the baby's just screaming with hunger. A syringe, so we don't kind of just put the syringe right into the baby's mouth and
That's,
squirt.
by the way, at the
That's
hospital,
what?
that's how they show it at the hospitals now, which is
Yeah. We don't just squirt like that. we don't. We allow the baby to suckle on the finger first. And then as the baby's suckling on the finger, we then use a syringe with some milk in it, and we squirt it right by the finger. I don't know how I'm going to, let's see. So as the baby's sucking on the finger, we're then squirting a little bit of milk right by the side of the finger to kind of push milk into the baby, right? We're not just squirting by the sides. We're not dripping. We're not drip feeding. That's how we do with dogs and cats. A baby's not a dog or a cat. We allow them to suckle on a finger first.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay, getting to our next question from someone who's still waiting for baby. Is it necessary to start massaging or try to hand express colostrum before labor starts? Or is it okay or even better to wait to do this after the birth? And then a follow-up for after birth, I guess we should always try to latch first, then hand express to help build supply. Is that correct? Really good question. Thank you, Sarah, for asking it.
Well, I think it's always a good idea to start learning how to hand express even before the baby arrives. I think it's a skill that mothers should have in the arsenal, all the different skills that they have. So I think it's a good idea because as the baby comes out and the baby's not able to suckle, we already have that in our arsenal. We know how to do it. So let's assume this is a breast. I know it's a very colorful one, but roll very gently on either side of the breast. So it's not meant to be painful. It's just meant to be a very gentle roll. We put our hands on either side of the areola. So that's the nipple, that's the areola, the darkened areas over there. We push in towards the chest wall. So we push in and then we press together and we release. In, together, release. We do this at about week 37, 8, 39, all the way up until the baby arrives, okay? And when we start to collect some droplets of colostrum, we pull the plunger off a syringe, and we can then start collecting the tiny little droplets that might arrive at the nipple. Why we do this? We do this so that moms learn and they're empowered to collect colostrum before the baby arrives. Colostrum is there isn't a fixed volume of colostrum before the baby arrives. It's like a never-ending well filled with colostrum. As the baby comes out and as the placenta is detached from the uterus, then we find that moms are able to produce more substantial amounts of colostrum. So then we can collect maybe 1 or 2 mils. Before the baby arrives, you might just get 1/2 mil or something. And that's quite normal and that's expected. So the placenta removing then stimulates a proper colostrum production.
I also wanted to say some moms are not able to do this on their own, and I don't want you to be discouraged or then think, oh my God, I have no milk. Rather, maybe see Mythili or another IBCLC to help you, show you the right technique. But remember, first and foremost, that this is not about creating a stash or having, 50 syringes in the freezer. This is about you learning a skill and you telling the breasts to get ready rather than creating the stash, right? So
that's it.
And then following on with that, there is a mom who's asking, where can we get good quality and sterile syringes for feeding? Is there any particular brand or where do they go?
Any pharmacy, they'll send you a whole box full of syringes for $10, right? That's all you need. You don't need anything fancy. You don't need to spend $2 on a syringe if you know what I'm talking about. You can get any syringe. These ones are 10 ml syringes, so they're quite large, but you could get like the 3 ml ones, and that's perfectly fine too. Okay?
Okay, that's great to know. And then let's talk about hand expression versus pumping quickly, because we had a question earlier about should I bring my pump to the hospital? What is your take on that?
Well, I often think in the first couple of days, the goal should be to learn how to put the baby onto the breast and not pump. Because when you start pumping too early, we then start getting a bit more caught up in the volumes. Actually, the volumes don't really matter. It is about the stimulation that actually really matters in the first couple of days. If a mom is expecting the baby to go to NICU or to NICU or to SCN or the special care nursery, then I'll say bring in the breast pump. But if the baby's well and healthy and the mom's well and healthy, then there's no need to use the breast pump in the first couple of days. The stimulation should come from the baby suckling at the breast. So no need to bring the breast pump into the hospital.
Okay.
In fact, you don't need to use the breast pump until you're planning a separation between you and your baby, right? So I would certainly not encourage moms to start using the breast pump until maybe about 4 weeks in general.
Okay. And would you, for moms who do not, for some reason, want to direct latch at all,
Mhm.
uh, would you then still say that until the milk comes in, don't use a pump, but use hand expression?
Um, no. If a mom's not expecting to put the baby onto the breast at all, I would say we need to hand express a colostrum, give that to the baby, and then start pumping as early as possible. Because that stimulation is what's going to then determine what the milk supply is going to look like.
Okay, good. Amazing. What else are we going to talk
Can
about?
I talk about measuring the flange sizes?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah? Okay, hang on. I'm just going to take my little tool. Give me one sec.
Mummy's on the call. We're still here for your questions. Please keep them coming.
This
Uh,
is well, I mean, it's actually to measure the ring sizes, right? It's really just a ring ruler. I mean, it can double up as a ring ruler, but we also use it as you can measure your next Cartier ring. But we can also measure the nipple sizes with it. Fancy, I love it. Now, what we want to try and do, can you see this? Is this obvious? Can, right? Okay. Now, look, that's probably the correct size for this mummy, isn't it? So that's about 17. 17 mm is the exact size of this nipple. Okay. If he with a breast pump, like let's assume you're getting the S brand or the M brand breast pumps, which are the most common brands out there. Most of the nipple sizes or the flange sizes are a size 24 or a size 28, which is rather large. Can you see that? That's the size of a cow's udder. Okay. Most women don't have nipple sizes that large. Most women would have a size 21 or a size 19 or even smaller, 17. Okay, so using a 24 or a 28 is going to drag a lot of the areola into the flange. So I end up finding that women are just not producing as much as they should be on understimulating the breast when they should be doing a much better job with the pumping. And this could
okay.
be the usual thing that tends to happen. So always use a nipple ruler or a circle template like this, and we want to measure the exact size of the nipple. Okay?
With moms who do not have a pronounced nipple, moms who have flat nipples or
Mhm.
inverted, how do we measure those?
So same thing. When we can try, so if they're truly inverted, then it will be a bit of a challenge. Then I think you need to see an IBCLC. But if it's one of those shy nipples that can be coaxed out, then we measure the actual size of the shy nipple that comes out. If they are flat, nothing wrong with a flat nipple. I think most babies are still able to latch on with a flat nipple. A flat nipple just means that the nipple is not so sticky outy. It's just like that kind of just feeling.
Yeah.
Can you see that? It's a bit more flat, but not so sticky outy. That's basically what it means.
And so not having the right flange size, what does that mean? I mean, you said earlier, is it just the stimulation that we're not getting, it's not efficient enough? Or is it also, could it be nipple trauma that we are creating? Or what are the issues?
Yeah. So if you're using the wrong size flange, what tends to happen is you start rubbing on one side of the nipple instead of the other, and then it's like wearing badly fitting shoes, right? Like you get lots of friction blisters on that side of the nipple versus the other. Okay, and that can cause nipple trauma. If you're finding that your flange size is a bit too small, then I will always say put a little bit of oil or nipple balm or olive, coconut oil, whatever you want on the insides of the funnel so that you're actually reducing the friction forces between the breast and the flange. And that usually works like a dream as well.
You're not worried about that getting into the milk?
A little bit's okay. It's still edible oils anyway.
Well, if it's a good quality nipple cream, I think, petroleum jelly, not quite the same,
Well, moms eat all sorts of things anyway, don't they?
maybe.
But
Oh,
if you think about it, if they're using these nipple balms on their breast and then baby's feeding on it, isn't it the same thing?
yeah, but by the time the baby latches on, that product would have gone and absorbed, would be what I think. Anyway,
Okay.
doesn't
Oh,
matter.
hang on. Can I talk about a little bit more about nipple health? So
Yeah.
a lot of moms also use silverettes and other breast shells to protect the breast against the bras that they wear. Um, I often find that in Singapore, in the climate that we live in right now, I'm assuming all of us are in Singapore, it collects a lot of moisture under that shell or under the silverette or the silver cup. And what tends to happen is dark, warm, and moist environments always tend to start helping and thrive and yeast starts thriving in those sorts of environments. So I find that a lot of women who use these on a regular basis, breast pads as well, it just serves as a perfect petri dish for all of these things to grow on. And I find that women get thrush and yeast infections and then this badly healing wounds. I find that if you could air dry the breast, so just going without a bra, wearing your husband's big and airy shirts or a button-down shirt that you're just opening up and allowing air circulation around the breast, that tends to heal the breast a lot better than using anything of these fancy schmancy things.
I thought that the whole premise of the silverettes was, that now even in care of in wound care, we encourage moist healing, and that silver is the antimicrobial agent, is what they claim. That would kill the bacteria and any yeast that could be forming there. Um, I think that's what they're saying.
Yeast or bacteria? Which one does it kill? I think it kills bacteria, not so much of the yeast.
Antimicrobial. Yeah, you're right. The yeast is a different thing, probably.
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
I think in the current climate that we live in, because it's so moist, it might work in a colder climate where you're not so wet and moist all the time. But in a mother who's constantly leaking, I find that that might actually contribute to a bit more yeasty growth rather than anything else.
So many things coming up now. So first one is a recipe, DIY remedy for sore nipples. So if I have those cracked nipples, what is your go-to?
Breast milk.
Breast milk? What about the salt solution that they put in? No?
No, please don't. No. Yeah, gross. Okay, sorry. It's
Seen it so many times on multiple Instagram channels, and also by IBCLCs actually. So the 10% salt solution that you soak your nipples in. So you're not a fan of that.
I don't like it because I tend to see a lot of these breasts getting um wet wound damages, right? Can you imagine your fingers and your toes soaking in water for too long and it gets all pruny? Imagine your breast doing the same thing. It gets all pruny and then the skin starts to slough off.
Okay.
Um, Not ideal. I feel like a little bit of breast milk. So hand express a little bit of breast milk. Use that and rub it on the nipple and the areola, and that is perfect healing for the nipple and the areola. And that's all you really need. I've also heard of using these suction-only devices, and they fill it up with salt or Epsom salts and things to kind of help with blocked ducts. Again, I'm not a huge fan of that because I find that they actually cause a lot more nipple trauma and damage because that area is so sensitive, the skin's so thin. And if you're pulling so much of that into that suction-only device, I find that it causes a lot more excoriation and wet tissue damage and things like that happening too. Not ideal.
That brings me to the next place I wanted to go, which was oftentimes a mom, once the milk is in and supply is established, and in those first 2 weeks or maybe even 4 weeks where the body is still figuring out how much that baby needs, we often get moms who have a leaking breast on the other side. So my baby is latching on my left and my right side is dripping. Now, one part of me is thinking, brilliant, I've got a lot of, milk coming and that should be encouraging. But what should a mom be doing for that? Because I see a lot of moms then using the Haka hand pump and or the shells. Are they a bit better, like the ladybug?
Mm.
What's your go-to tip for that leaking breast?
Well, if the mom's struggling to get milk supply up, then yeah, maybe you could try and collect a little bit. All that little drippings may help, tiny bits though. I mean, I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. I often find that moms should focus on feeding their babies and not collecting anything else beyond that, right? If the milk supply is not quite in skin to skin, feed the baby. Forget anything else.
Yeah.
Focus on feeding the baby, not the fridge, not the freezer, right? So if a mom's stressed and she's getting really upset and there's so many thoughts just driving through her brain, the last thing I want her to do is to focus on collecting the drippings,
Mhm.
right? I would say just get like a wet, like a, a towel or something and put some pressure on the breast, and that stops the leaks. It deactivates that fourth intercostal nerve and it stops leaking right away. And that's all you really need to do. A little bit of breast milk on your skin or on your baby's skin never caused any harm. In fact, I find that it's really healing for the skin. So if they
Yeah.
have got baby eczema or you've got a spot on your knee and you just want to try and get that healed, just rub it right in, and that usually works like a dream too.
Amazing. Perfect. So we have no more questions in the chat, and we have only 6 minutes left. And I think I'd like you to introduce, sorry, we didn't rehearse this, but you have a program that you offer at Mother and Child for moms in the postpartum period where they meet regularly, I think for 6 weeks. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and what you
Yeah.
mamas?
So it's called the New Moms Get-togethers. Now, this is I think it's a really powerful program that has been running in Mother and Child for yonks now, right? It's a 4-week program where we've gotten moms, first-time moms. Sometimes we have a separate group for first-time moms. We've got a separate group for moms of multiples. And what we try and do is we get these moms to come together, and as they start chatting about their birth stories, they chat about what's going on in their daily lives. They talk about all the struggles that they may be facing and all their little joyous little events, baby's first smile, baby's rolled over. They then realize that they're not quite in their own little silos. They find that they're not just, you know, isolated, I suppose. Um, and they find that they are creating their new tribe, a tribe that might be more important to them while the babies are growing as compared to their pre-pregnancy tribes. Do you know what I'm trying to say? We've gotten speakers who come in on a weekly basis. We might have a pelvic floor health physio. We might have someone who can talk about baby sleep, not in a sleep training or advocating kind of way, but really just to understand the baby's sleep cycles and what it might look like. We have mental health practitioners. We'll talk about what your prepartum moods would be and how they now would be different with a brand new baby. And especially when you have multiple kids, I think that also makes a huge difference on what it feels like to you, right? And then we also have a parenting coach. So that'd be the fourth person. Generally, sometimes we have someone else coming through of a parenting coach on what your parenting style might look like and how you can unpack your own parenting and how you might want to bring on your parenting style to this new baby that you might have. Again, very important for a second-time mom or a third-time mom, because how you parent one child will be quite different from parenting the second and the third children,
Yeah,
right?
amazing. That is a great offering. And when does that take place?
So we try and host it on a monthly basis. It and we so it's a 4-week program, like I said, and we recommend that moms come in sometime around their 4th week postpartum. Again, if they come in later, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, and they find that it's an empowering session really more than anything else. You might not learn very much, but actually being able to take their brand new babies out in a carrier or in a pram, taking the public transport on their very own, coming into the center, finding their way to mother and child, feeding out in public for the first time, public, whatever that looks like. It's actually mother and child. It's a nice little separate room at the top floor of Tangman Mall, so we don't get lots of passers-by anyway. Changing the nappy out in public for the first time, all of these little tiny little things. Very empowering for moms, I feel.
rites of passages. And then the other courses that I really like is you offer a baby care course. What is that called again? And who is it directed to? Is it parents or is it care like nannies, for example?
Two new programs, right? So one of it is called Care of the Newborn, which is now a standalone course that we offer on top of having it part of our childbirth classes. And that's about learning how to manage a brand new baby, how to soothe the baby, how to feed the baby, how to bath the baby if you even want to bath the baby. All of those things around having a brand new baby in the household. But we also do one for nannies and caregivers. Sometimes you might have a brand new helper who has never had a baby of her own or might have had a baby in a different country in a different setting, and learning all about what is safe sleep, how to prevent overheating, how to care for the baby, how to burp the baby, how to bottle feed the baby, how to feed via syringe or a feeding tube if necessary. What are the worrying things that we look out for? All of these things that we want our helpers to be equipped with this information. And this is what we now created for the new parents.
Especially because I had so many clients who had even issues with confinement nannies, with basic safety issues and so on. So I think that's a good thing for us to learn, and definitely for people who are in charge of our babies when we're not there. So amazing. Thanks for offering that. And that's it. I think we're at the end of our call today. Thank you so much again for joining us. People were dropping off and coming in and dropping off and coming in, and that's totally fine. And I think everybody got a lot out of the session. So thank you so much again. And thank you all the mamas for joining. And I'll send you a link later that you can share with your audience as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Johanna. Always a pleasure chatting with all of your team and your tribe as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Mythili. Thank you, mummies. Have a lovely day.